Hey all, Ron here from Military Images Magazine with a new episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail. Yesterday, I shared a second video relating the vivid Antietam reporting of Boston Journal correspondent Charles Carleton Coffin, life dates 1823 to 1896. Carleton, as he was known to his loyal readers, found himself in Hagerstown, Maryland, when the Battle of Sharpsburg along Antietam Creek unfolded on September 17th, 1862. His reports, the reports he filed from the battlefield, were compiled and published in 1893 in a book titled Stories of Our Soldiers. In this video, the third and final of three parts, Carleton shares his experience from about noon on the 17th when he sets out for the Burnside Bridge. And he goes on to share details of his travels throughout the rest of the day and the poignant aftermath of the battle. Carleton begins. The plan of McClellan was for Burnside to cross the Antietam by a stone bridge about 1 mile south of the Boonesboro Turnpike. The banks of the river at that point are steep and high. The road leading to the bridge winds down a narrow ravine. The bridge has three arches. It is 150 feet long and the roadway 12 feet wide. The western bank is very steep. About halfway up the hill is a limestone quarry, which gave shelter to Confederates. At the top of the hill is a stone wall, which also afforded shelter to the Confederates. They had planted 4 pieces of artillery to sweep the bridge. I was not able at the time of the battle, nor have I since been able to understand the plan of McClellan in ordering Burnside to make an attack at that point, for the river was fordable in many places, and Burnside could have crossed either above or below the bridge. It seems that McClellan relied very much upon Burnside, but that officer did not receive his orders until past 10 o'clock in the morning. At that time, Hooker, Mansfield, and Sedgwick had been repulsed. His orders directed him to carry the bridge, gain the heights beyond, and advance along their crests to Sharpsburg and reach the rear of Lee. He had less than 14,000 men. The task laid upon him was immeasurably greater and more difficult than that assigned to any other commander. He must carry the bridge, drive the Confederates from the hill, and move over an open field to attack the heights. The troops formed on the farm of Mr. Rohrbach. 8 batteries, numbering 48 cannon, opened fire upon the Confederates, holding the hill opposite the bridge. After a terrific cannonade, the 11th Connecticut, commanded by Colonel Kingsbury, advanced as skirmishers, deploying in the fields, firing from the fences. Crook's division followed, but came to a halt and opened fire, the soldiers taking aim at the puffs of smoke in the stone quarry. Sturgis's division passed in their rear and reached the bridge. The 2nd Maryland and 6th New Hampshire made a rush across it. Instantly, there were broad sheets of flame from the quarry and from the wall at the top of the hill. The head of the column melted in an instant. The troops fell back under the shelter of the ridge. This took place before I arrived upon the scene. An aide came from McClellan to Burnside with a message that the bridge must be carried at all hazards. Ferrero's brigade, in which were the 35th and 21st Massachusetts, advanced to make a second assault. The 11th Connecticut again acted as skirmishers. The troops fixed their bayonets and threw aside their knapsacks. The 11th Connecticut dashed down to the river. Colonel Kingsbury fell, mortally wounded. Though canister swept them down, those behind rushed on up to the bridge and across it, men pitching headlong from the parapet into the water, shells exploding among them. But with a wild yell, they reached the shelter of the western bank, reformed, and moved up the road, gaining the flank of the Confederates and driving them from the quarry and the wall. General Toombs of Georgia was in command of the Confederates at that point. Before the war, he had boasted in Congress that the time would come when he would call the roll of his slaves on Bunker Hill. But at this moment, he was retreating to the high land near Sharpsburg. Some of the troops crossed the stream at the bridge and a portion at one of the fords, where the whole 14,000 might have crossed with far less loss of life than at the bridge. McClellan made no attempt to cross the Antietam on the Boonesboro Turnpike. The bridge there was commanded by Longstreet's cannon planted on the hills east of town. McClellan retained Porter's corps on the east bank of the river, fearing that Lee might throw forward his center and divide the Union Army. McClellan had greatly overestimated Lee's force. He believed he was confronted by more than 100,000 Confederates, when in fact Lee had less than 50,000. I stood by the hill, by the bridge, and saw the close of the battle in the fields southeast of Sharpsburg. It was very evident that Lee was weakening his left flank by the Dunker Church and hurrying his troops to resist Burnside. It was fully 3 o'clock before Burnside was in position to advance. His troops moved quickly to the attack and drove the first line of the Confederates. As the troops came into the open field, a destructive storm of shells was hurled upon them. They reached a fence but could go no farther. Burnside sent a message to McClellan that he must have more troops, otherwise he could not hold his position. McClellan replied that he would send him a battery, but had no infantry to spare. He must hold his ground till dark, and then, if he could not remain, he must fall back to the bridge, but he must hold that, or all would be lost. I cannot go over the features of the Battle of Antietam with much complacency toward McClellan. Porter had 12,000 men. Slocum's division of Franklin's corps numbered 6,000. Smith's division had only made one gallant charge. His troops were not in any sense exhausted. McClellan had, at that moment, from 20 to 25,000 men and 100 guns, which had taken no part in the battle. Burnside had all but turned the right flank of Lee. Wilcox's division was almost up to Sharpsburg. There was evident commotion in Lee's lines. I could see officers going with their horses upon the run. The time had come for McClellan to throw in all his available force to aid Burnside. Although the troops upon the right had fought in the morning, they were in condition to make a demonstration to retain the Confederate troops in the vicinity of Dunker Church. Nothing was done. McClellan could send only one battery to help Burnside. It was a magnificent spectacle just before sunset. The hillsides all aflame with cannon and the long lines of light flashing from the troops of the two armies in the field southeast of the town. But gradually, the thunder died away and the silence came on, broken only by an occasional volley and single shots like the last drops after a shower. The army confidently expected a renewal of the battle on the next day. During the night, 2 divisions under General Couch had arrived, giving McClellan 35,000 fresh troops. He decided not to renew the attack for the reason that if he were defeated, Lee could march on to Washington or Baltimore without an enemy to oppose him. Besides, he expected 14,000 more men. One can hardly understand the state of mind that led him to such a conclusion. He could see from the prisoners captured, many of them being barefoot and their clothes in rags, that Lee was in no condition to make an offensive movement. He knew that Lee was short of supplies, that the Confederates had been living largely on green corn, that Lee was far from his base of supplies, that he had no reinforcements at hand, that his troops were exhausted, that he must be short of ammunition, that he had suffered severely in battle, that in a retreat Lee must cross the Potomac. But these considerations seemingly had no weight with McClellan. Early in the morning, I rode to the right and conversed with the troops, which were in position and expecting orders. Rations had been served, and everybody seemed cheerful. Colonel Andrews of the Massachusetts 2nd was commanding a brigade in the 12th Corps. I asked him how his men were. All right. They had a pretty good time yesterday, but having a good breakfast, they feel well, was the reply. A flag of truce was displayed by the Confederates. Lee desired that the wounded should be cared for on the score of humanity. The truce lasted till 1 o'clock. During the afternoon, I rode to the summit of Elk Ridge, a lofty elevation on the east bank of the Antietam, overlooking the battlefield. Beyond Sharpsburg, a cloud of dust filled the air, and baggage wagons were moving west. I thought it indicated retreat on the part of Lee. The day closed without any movement on the part of McClellan. The morning of the 19th dawned, and Lee was gone with all his artillery, except one iron gun and some broken down wagons. I rode over the field and saw many of the Confederate dead. In the field near the Dunker Church, I came upon a Union soldier lying upon his back, the ground around stained with his blood. There was a pleasant smile on his face. His Bible was open upon his breast. Taking it up, I read, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me." The slaughter had been terrible in the sunken road. I could have walked a long distance upon the bodies of dead Confederates. Some of them were shot dead while climbing the fence, and their bodies were hanging on the rails. One had been killed while tearing his cartridge with his teeth. He had died instantly, and the cartridge was in his hand. An officer was still grasping his sword. He had fallen while cheering his men with all his muscles set, his nerves under tension, the word of command on his lips. It was as if a mighty mower had swept them down at a single stroke. Riding up to the turnpike a short distance south of the Dunker Church, I saw a dead Confederate hanging across the limb of a cherry tree by the roadside. He had been a sharpshooter and had taken the position to pick off Union officers, but himself had been shot. I afterward learned that several Union soldiers had seen puffs of smoke amid the foliage of the tree and had given return shots, one of which had taken effect. Riding down to Sharpsburg, I found a large number of Confederate wounded. I conversed with an officer of General Walker's division. He said, "I have been in all the battles before Richmond and at Manassas, but I never experienced such a fire as you gave us yesterday. The slaughter at the sunken road was terrible. We couldn't keep our ranks closed, and if your troops had pressed on, they might have broken through our line. We were all tired out. We got up from Harper's Ferry on the morning of the battle. We had no supper Tuesday, marched all night, had no breakfast, and went right into the fight just as soon as we reached the field. We had lived on green corn and apples half the time since we left Richmond. Half our troops were barefoot. We were in no condition to fight." And here we end the story of Carleton, his reporting, the third chapter, the third video installment in that larger story that Carleton compiled from his news reports. Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail.